Welcome to History Reimagined. Here, forgotten chapters of the medieval world are retold with immersive storytelling. Journey through tales shaped by storm, intrigue, and ambition. If you're drawn to the echoes of kings, legends, and empires, remember to like and subscribe to support more cinematic journeys into the shadows of history. Your curiosity fuels the rediscovery of stories left behind by time's passing. Tonight's story delves into the turbulent life of Harthacnut, the king whose fate was sealed by feasts, rivalry, and ancient tradition. We unravel the mystery of his sudden death and see how the shadows of family and power forever changed England's destiny. Settle in as we begin our journey on the storm-bound coasts of 11th century England and Denmark, where history's tides clash under a tempestuous sky. Chapter 1. Shadows over the North Sea. The wind howled wild and cold across the North Sea on a night no mortal would wish to travel. Above the battered waves, the skies were thick with storm clouds lit by brief claws of lightning. In the dark, along England's craggy coastline, ancient rivalries stirred, legends whispered among the stones. Tonight, destinies that had long simmered would finally begin to twist together. On this windswept coast, where the cries of gulls are lost in thunder, young Harthacnut braced himself against the chill. He was the son of Cnut, ruler of both England and Denmark. Two worlds divided by sea and tradition, cloaked in fur, his eyes searched the horizon, sensing beneath the storm that change was coming. Every gust of wind carried with it hints of old stories, tales of Norse warriors and Anglo-Saxon kings. Harthacnut, caught between two mighty heritages, felt a burden older than himself. He knew only the halls of power, where his father's rule cast both shadow and light. But unlike his father, whose name was spoken in awe and fear, Harthacnut was young. His future wavered like a flame in the wind, threatened by the jealousies and ambitions of noblemen whispering in the shadows. He wondered if he'd ever truly belong to either land. The night storm harboured more than wind and water. It was thick with rumours and secrets, as old as the stones that lined the shore. In every crash of the waves against the cliffs, Harthacnut heard both warning and promise. What lay ahead was uncertain, but already the forces that shaped his destiny were at work. In nearby halls, warriors and courtiers gathered, their faces flickering with candlelight, their words sharp as the salt in the air. In the great wooden hall, firelight danced along shields and woven tapestries. Laughter rose and fell among the company, but every eye kept watch on the doors. King Cnut, mighty and commanding, sat at the head of the table, his presence solid as iron. Harthacnut lingered among the shadows, aware that every gesture, every choice was measured against the legends of his father. The air trembled with a tension that came from years of conquest and uneasy peace. Above the storm, the oaken beams creaked as another gust battered the hall. Outside, sentries paced along the ramparts, cloaks pulled tight, their boots heavy on stone. Harthacnut's mind wandered to tales his Norse tutors told him of bravery, betrayal, and the sea's endless hunger. This was a night when such old tales did not feel distant. They pressed against the present, shaping the path young princes might walk before dawn's pale light. Beneath the weight of inherited crowns, Harthacnut's heart beat with both fear and longing. He yearned to prove himself worthy of the kingdoms split by salt and sword. But every gathering in the feast hall echoed with old grudges. The Anglo-Saxon lords eyed their Danish overlords with suspicion, their alliances fragile, born of necessity, not trust. Between every burst of laughter, silence folded in, heavy as the storm pressing against the timbers above. The king's advisers circled quietly, watching the young prince. Each adviser brought knowledge of distant lands, ancient laws, and the shape of things to come. Harthacnut had been schooled in the runes of the Norse, but also the written words of the English. His fate lingered at the crossroads of two worldviews. Some saw him as a promise of unite others, a living reminder of conquests never fully accepted. The throne, it seemed, was never truly at rest. Somewhere in the dark, the east wind carried voices from the wave sounds that seemed almost human, if not for their icy edge. Outside the hall, great stones remembered older times, when kings were buried with swords and ships. Harthacnut lay awake, listening. The sea spoke in riddles, reminding him that power could be as shifting as sand. In the distance, a bell tolled, marking the passage of another hour lost to restless uncertainty. For Harthacnut, every night was filled with lessons handed down by story. His Danish blood remembered the sagas and valour of Norse raiders. Yet in his dreams he walked green hills and felt the pull of English roots. Sometimes he wished he could be just a boy by the fire, not heir to a kingdom bound by shadows and storms. But history allows no simple dreams for sons of kings. The future pressed at the edges, insistent and cold. In another corner of the great hall, seasoned warriors sharpened axes, their hands steady, their eyes wary. Their stories echoed with battles fought across the North Sea, names carved into memory by steel and sacrifice. They watched Harthacnut, measuring the weight of his destiny. Would he grow to match the legacy of Cnut, or falter amid division's whispers? On such nights, when lightning split the sky, it was said the spirits of old kings watched from the wind. Cnut himself, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, wore a crown that seemed both shield and shackle. His voice filled the hall with a commanding calm, yet behind his strength lay a quiet worry for the boy who would inherit his seat. Cnut understood that the crown was a double-edged gift-stone that gave power, but took peace. He wondered if his young son could weather storms both of nature and of men's hearts, as the future narrowed before them. As the feast was set and goblets filled, alliances were sealed with wary toast. Nobles traded pledges beneath banners stitched with dragons and crosses. But underneath the clatter of flagons and platters, tension wound tight. Every eye weighed the subtle gestures of friend and foe. Tomorrow, or perhaps in seasons yet to come, these same voices might call for peace or for rebellion. The walls held their secrets, silent witnesses to promises made and broken by candlelight. The storm raged on, relentless, as if the heavens themselves warned of coming strife. Outside, ships strained against moorings, their crews huddled close from wind and rain. Harthacnut gazed into the swirling fire, his thoughts drawn between sea and shore, between the restless desires of Denmark and the deep traditions of England. On nights like these, with thunder above, he felt both ancient and impossibly young, poised on the edge of history's unfolding storm. The shadows flickered along the walls, painting ancient scenes in trembling gold. Harthacnut's mother, Emma of Normandy, sat nearby, her presence a quiet strength. She too carried the scars and hopes of many kingdoms to bridge between worlds, and a guide for her son. Through storm and silence, mother and child shared a bond built on survival. Together they braced for tomorrow's uncertainties, knowing that every family secret could shape the fate of nations. As night deepened, the court storyteller was summoned to ease troubled hearts. In richly woven words, old tales became more than memory. They reminded the hall of what bound them together. Stories of gods, giants, and kings long past lingered in the candlelit hush. Harthacnut listened, awed by the weight of what came before him. Each legend whispered that the line between myth and history was thinner than the storm that howled outside their doors. Even amid laughter and song, unease seeped through the feast. Some lords eyed each other with suspicion, memories of betrayals lingering from battles fought and lost. Shadows flickered behind tapestries, echoing with voices that warned of ambition's cost. The young prince felt these worries settle on his shoulders, a mantle heavier than any cloak. Trust was as scarce as the warmth from devoured hearths, and Harthacnut learned quickly to listen more than he spoke. The great bell tolled again, its sound rolling across the black water and up through the stone keep. Outside, the sea's fury grew stronger. Lightning revealed the silhouette of a lone rider approaching, perhaps carrying word from distant allies or enemies. In the flicker of firelight, every detail was scrutinized. For in days when kings were made and unmade by rumor, even a single rider's message could tip the balance of power, changing tomorrow's history. Harthacnut's youthful gaze met that of his father, who quietly assessed his son's resolve. Cnut's silent approval was both a blessing and a burden. The prince understood that one day he would stand at this very table, weighed by the gaze of others. Would he inspire loyalty or provoke dissent? In a realm shaped as much by myth as by law, the line between a king and a pawn was drawn thin. Tonight, beneath thunder, it was drawn thin. Tonight, beneath thunder, it was thinner still. By midnight, the feast's energy waned and the fire's warmth retreated. Guards tightened their watch at the gates, peering into darkness for approaching threats. In the silence, Harthacnut lingered at a high window, looking out upon the battered surf. He imagined distant shores Denmark's rugged wilds, and England's fog-wrapped fields. Both lands called to him, neither promising safety. Each step he would take from this night would ripple through years yet unwritten. Long after the last story ended, Harthacnut lay awake as rain tapped against cold glass. He thought of his half-brother Edward, living far to the south, and wondered if their paths must one day cross as foes. Rivalry, he knew, could be as fierce as any storm. Yet for now, these worries mingled with the lull of the sea. In the darkness, the young prince drifted into uneasy sleep, dreams twisted by the wind's long lament. Dawn would come, banishing shadows from the battered coasts and lighting the path ahead. For Harthacnut, the future was as vast and unpredictable as the North Sea itself. Already, forces beyond his understanding conspired to test his spirit and his claim. In this world, every sun that rose brought with it both peril and promise. As the first light crept across the storm-tossed waves, the story of a king and the fate of kingdoms was only just beginning. Chapter 2. Born of Two Kingdoms. In the flickering glow of midnight candles, Harthacnut's story unfolds within walls thick with secrets and ambition. Born of the union between the mighty Cnut the Great and his English queen, Emma of Normandy, he stood as a living bridge between Denmark and England. His footsteps echoed in both realms, a prince of two peoples, shaped by storms that raged across the North Sea and the English Channel. Harthacnut's heritage was as complex as the shifting alliances around him. Each evening, in the gilded majesty of his father's court, he learned to navigate a world where words could be weapons and loyalty was thin as spun gold. Denmark's Viking spirit met English formality, and in Harthacnut those identities blended uneasily, forming a new vision of kingship that few dared to imagine. Raised amid whispers and intrigue, the young prince's lessons were steeped in both Norse saga and Saxon lore. The banqueting tables overflowed with honeyed mead, but beneath the laughter, conspiracies brewed like storms offshore. Every noble held their own ambitions, and Harthacnut was always watched, measured, and weighed, a royal child poised between destinies, learning from his formidable father's shadow. Cnut the Great, his father, was renowned for his might and diploma Cyrilla of a North Sea empire. In that candle-lit court, young Harthacnut studied the way Cnut forged bonds with gifts and threats, binding together Danes and Saxons under one crown. He saw that real power depended on understanding every rivalry, every silent oath muttered just out of earshot amidst the flicker of lamplight. Yet the palace was not only a place of learning, it was a battlefield of influence. Harthacnut watched alliances bloom and wither beneath hanging tapestries children of rival nobles brought to feast together, hoping to soften ancient grudges. He was taught to hide his fears, speak carefully, and remember that even the faintest rumour could change the course of a throne's future. The court's grandeur did little to smother the biting chill of uncertainty. Harthacnut's mother, Emma, whispered tales of Normandy and the fragility of crowns. At banquets, music spun through smoky air, and torches revealed faces shadowed by secrets. The prince listened and learned, never knowing who would become friend or foe by sunrise. So many futures depended on the choices made in these glittering halls. It was not just blood that made Harthacnut a princeat, it was the expectation that drenched his every moment. He was the hope of both the Danes and the Saxons, pressed into a role he could not refuse. Tutors drilled him in Latin chants and shipbuilding, in swordplay and statecraft, reminding him that a king must be both scholar and warrior, gentle and fearsome by turns. Each lesson etched deeper. In those early years, while other children played, Harthacnut was present at councils where men argued beneath painted shields and antlered chandeliers. His words were few, but his eyes missed little. He learned the names of every earl, every bishop, every rumour tangled in the rushes. The pressures built quietly, like the swell of a winter tide on the coastlines of his father's realm. Sometimes loneliness crept in with the northern wind. To be both Danish and English often meant belonging to neither place entirely. Harthacnut donned garments of both cultures, spoke dialects that shifted with courtly company, and found that even laughter often hid an edge. Still, the prince carried on, guided by whispers that his future would demand unity for lands that did not always wish to be joined. Great feasts glittered in memory tables groaning with roasted meats, silver goblets raised to old gods and new saints. Here, under torchlight, Harthacnut saw how kinship could be celebrated and feuds momentarily forgotten. Yet every cup raised in friendship might hide a poison, and every jest could mask intention. Royalty meant vigilance. The crown he was promised was heavy long before it ever touched his brow. Men and women jostled for influence, vying to whisper into the young prince's ear. Some offered gifts rich furs, rare relics, or tales of hero kings to win his loyalty. Others used subtler tools, promising support only if Harthacnut remembered their families when he ruled. The balance was delicate. Too much favour risked defending others, not enough, and he was left alone in a court that trusted nothing. The shadow of Cnut's power loomed long over Harthacnut. Stories of the kings, victories at sea, his patience in treaty halls, echoed endlessly the example to follow and the legacy to match. Yet Harthacnut sensed the difference between living in legend's light and being the focus of every watchful gaze. Love for his father mingled with awe and fear. Could he ever step from behind so mighty a throne? At times Harthacnut retreated from the candle-lit bustle, wandering corridors where stone walls whispered the histories of kings past. There he wondered about destiny. Did the blood of conquerors and queens guarantee greatness, or only ensure that every step would be scrutinized, every success shadowed by expectation? The answers eluded him, hidden in the silent echoes of those ancient halls. Rulership, he learned, was not bestowed. It was earned by surviving courts' treacherous games. Harthacnut watched his father's advisers, studied every gesture for signs of trust or betrayal. Men's faces changed in firelight, sometimes loyal, sometimes hungry for opportunity. In this world no secret was safe for long. The prince learned to smile at enemies, to measure laughter, and to remember every slight. Beneath the castle's banners, the future seemed both bright and storm-bound. Harthacnut's education in kingship shaped him as much as his bloodline. Behind grand feasts and the promise of a stable realm simmered dangers seen and unseen, jealous step-siblings, rival claimants and barons whose swords waited for the first sign of weakness. Every day the lessons of survival grew harder. Not all was tension. There were moments of warmth, Emma drawing her son close and sharing advice gleaned from Norman courts, the laughter of half-siblings, some loyal, some wary. These memories became threads in Harthacnut's tapestry of kingship, reminders that even a prince was, at heart, a son and brother, shaped by the quiet love found amidst courtly storms. At night, storms off the North Sea rattled windows and set tapestries trembling. Harthacnut lay awake, his dreams filled with ships cutting through mist and banners snapping in fierce winds. Those visions mingled with his waking lessons, a reminder that his heritage demanded strength in battle and subtlety in peace. Every gust seemed to urge him toward a future nobody could fully predict. Harthacnut inherited not just the ambitions of Cnut, but the wounds of conquest. Old grudges lingered in the court, Saxon nobles recalling losses, Danish champions whispering tales of past glories. The prince's challenge was to navigate these grudges, building bridges where possible, and defending his place when peace threatened to unravel. The legacy he was born to was a double-edged sword. The wisdom of both courts seeped into Harthacnut. He learned to value courage and cleverness in equal measure. The halls of power echoed with chants and feasts, but also with plots wrapped in velvet. His childhood was shaped by these dualities. The world admired his birthright, but he knew firsthand how quickly trust could be broken and how easily hope could become a weapon. Sometimes, walking the torchlit corridors, Harthacnut would pause to listen. The distant clash of training swords, the murmur of servants, the hushed debates in foreign tongues, all became part of his education. He learned that a prince must hear more than is spoken, sense the moods of his people, and anticipate the moves of those who circled him, eager for favour or opportunity at every turn. With each passing season, Harthacnut's grasp grew firmer on sword hilt and sceptre alike. The lessons from Cnut and Emma forged a ruler as determined as he was cautious. Though the path to the throne was fraught, he began to sense his own strength in the careful weaving of alliances, the art of patience, and the power of holding his composure even as tempers flared around royal banquets. Still, uncertainty shadowed the prince's heart. Stories of rivals in distant halls, whispers that his rule might come too soon or too late, became midnight worries. Royal tutors reminded him that blood bound him to the past, but true kingship demanded forging something new. With every lesson, Harthacnut grew more aware of the burden he would inherit and wondered how his reign might someday be remembered. The prince's upbringing was a masterwork in diplomacy, resilience, and the slow burn of ambition. Watching, listening, and learning, Harthacnut became the cautious heir his parents had hoped for. He was shaped by Denmark and England alike, forever standing at the crossroads of two kingdoms, destined to claim a throne, but always mindful of the shadows lurking just beyond the warm reach of candlelight. Thus, Harthacnut stood on the threshold of history, neither fully Danish nor solely English, but something forged from both. The fate of kingdoms rested on his readiness, each lesson a step toward a destiny he never chose, yet could not avoid. As courtly darkness deepened, political plots simmered beneath every golden banquet table, preparing Harthacnut for a tumultuous reign that would test every lesson learned in those gilded halls. Chapter 3. The Unravelling Web. Night falls across Denmark and England, but uneasy hearts find no rest. The death of King Cnut sends ripples through royal courts and common halls alike. No throne sits empty for long, and already eyes are shifting, calculating chances, whispering names. Shadows weigh heavy on those who wait for mail or messenger, sensing that the order left by Cnut will soon turn to uncertainty and strife. A storm of intrigue brews as Harthacnut claims Cnut's legacy, crossing the narrow seas between two kingdoms plagued by unrest. Across damp stone passageways, anxious footsteps echo. Nobody knows if their allegiances will bring fortune or doom. Harthacnut's royal authority flickers, contested not only by distant nobles but by someone much closer, Harold Harefoot, his own blood, hungry for his father's crown. Suspicion becomes the court's silent companion. Lines are drawn in the lamplight. Secret messages pass from gloved hand to gloved hand beneath tables piled high with charters and ancient seals. Where Cnut's word once bound enemies together, now former friends become wary rivals. Harold Harefoot grows bold, emerging from the surging tide of contenders eager to claim dominion. Harthacnut watches, enveloped in distrust, for even the most loyal can betray when the rewards are gilded with a crown. A hush falls over courtly gatherings where once banter and laughter filled the night air. Old alliances fracture with every new rumour and each broken seal. Those who carried Cnut's decree now clutch it close or burn it swiftly, uncertain of the shifting winds. Spies haunt the corridors, their faces half-lit by candlelight, eyes lingering on every closed door. Harthacnut stands increasingly alone, every council fraught with anxious glances. Harold Harefoot moves through the labyrinth of intrigue, gathering sympathizers with hearty handshakes and quiet promises. He appears at banquets with a smile, but his ambitions cast long shadows behind him. The mood in the hall has changed trust, is gold and gold is fleeting. Servants whisper of letters that never reach their lord and of disappearances in the night. The web grows tighter, ensnaring the wary and unwary alike. A secret council convenes in the blue hours before dawn, lit only by the sputter of dying torches. Faces, haggard with worry, debate the fate of two kingdoms. Some urge war, others caution patience. All are wary of traitors seated among them. The nobles of Denmark remember Cnut's might, but Harthacnut's rule is unsteady. England too senses the drift, nothing feels secure, and tomorrow's lords are not yet chosen. By the cold shores of the North Sea, messengers ride fleet horses across the night. Wax seals are snapped open and distant Manasum contain words of welcome, others threats. Harthacnut learns that control of the realm means more than wielding a scepter, it demands vigilance, for rebellion may take root in any heart. Every sunrise brings new uncertainty. Even the loyal now hedge their allegiances quietly, seeking the upper hand. In smoky chambers, tapestries shiver with draughts drawn through stone arrow slits. Trusted courtiers drift apart. Where once oaths were made with swords bared in camaraderie, now agreements are whispered, concealed beneath the hum of nervous conversation. Harthacnut's messengers move under cloaks, wary of archers in the shadows. Meanwhile, Harold Harefoot's supporters whisper his name, gathering strength behind closed doors, plotting the day they might declare him king. The countryside is restless, villagers gossip in low voices, sensing the temperature of the realm shifting. In both Denmark and England, eyes turn west and east, wondering which direction the axe may fall. The mood at court thickens, as if the stone walls themselves absorb doubts and secrets. Harthacnut's hold depends upon news that travels faster than blades, and upon loyalties that seldom survive the darkness before dawn. The great halls that once rang with the music of Cnut's reign now echo with uncertainty and caution. Stewards scrutinize unfamiliar faces, while old knights weigh oaths against opportunity. Harsh winds batter the castle towers, rattling doors and reminding all that nature, like politics, obeys no master for long. Harthacnut sits beneath gilded banners, his mind embroiled in questions: who will stand beside him, and who sharpens daggers in the dark? Rival claimants send envoys beneath lantern-lit archways, each seeking alliances through barter or blackmail. The game is delicatoni. Careless word can ignite feuds that outlive kings. Harthacnut's council grows smaller, for trust is a luxury none can afford. Some confess their fears in hurried prayers, while others sharpen ambitions that glint colder than steel. The air hums with secrets, each promising to shape the realm's uncertain fate. On silent nights, the flicker of torches casts uncertain shadows on stone. Servants scurry with urgent messages, passing hastily between lords and ladies. Every household suspects spies, and even laughter seems edged with suspicion. Harthacnut's eyes scan every corner for every friend who swears loyalty. An enemy lurks among the shadows, emboldened by Cnut's empty throne. The realm's harmony dissolves as pride and fear pull former allies apart. Not all betrayal is thunderous. Some comes with a subtle exchange of glances or the gentle passing of a folded parchment. Ambition is the realm's currency now, and none bear it more shrewdly than Harold Harefoot. He cultivates favour, listening more than he speaks, reading the court's anxious mood. Harthacnut finds that power is isolated, fraught with loneliness and the ceaseless need to guard against invisible threats. Candlelight reveals a procession of faces, some drawn with old loyalties and others masked by new intentions. Allies urge Harthacnut to act swiftly. Delay might doom his claim to treachery. Yet every decision appears fraught, for even a misstep in trust could unravel the fragile peace holding kingdoms together. The boundaries between accident and conspiracy fade, leaving the king surrounded by a tangle of doubt and divided counsel. Rumours gather shapesome, say Harold Harefoot possesses his father's cunning, others that he preys on the weak. Each whisper grows in the retelling, passed between merchant and monk, thane and servant. In remote keeps, loyalty is wagered quietly, set aside for whoever rises strongest. Harthacnut feels the realms pulse through these rumours, his own authority wavering as the people's faith divides and spreads like cracks across ancient stone. Stolen moments of honesty surface only when the hour is late and the corridors seem empty. Harthacnut confides in a handful of trusted voices, each retreating later with heavy hearts. The burden of leadership consumes sleep, for dreams follow the realities of broken alliances and hidden foes. Outside, dawn approaches cool and uncertain, as if the world itself waits to see which claimant emerges to command its loyalty and its fate. The atmosphere at court sharpens, every banquet now tense with the knowledge that alliances are as fleeting as a spilled goblet of wine. Those who once agreed across tables now watch every movement for signs of betrayal. The king's health and word are endlessly debated. His absence or silence gives rise to feverish speculation. Harthacnut feels the ground shifting beneath him, each step further into rivalry's maze, each hour darker than the last. Parliamentary gatherings once set for policy now descend into accusation. Who broke which seal, who sent which letter, whose loyalty falters most? Even the realm's clergy, long the keepers of unity, dispute among themselves. Some urge submission to Harold, others to Harthacnut, and still more hedge their support, hoping to outlast the coming storm. As the old saying goes, when kings contend, the land itself suffers. The air is thick with consequence. As winter sets in, the kingdoms grow colder still. Roads are watched carefully, for every traveller may bear forbidden news or dangerous allegiance. Those who ride in the king's service cloak themselves well and sleep with daggers at hand. Harthacnut's authority is tested with each delivery and each petition. Outside, the people pray for stability, while inside the warring courts, only the most cunning and determined hope to survive the bitter nights. The unravelling web creeps into every castle, every village, every heart. Harthacnut broods on the difficulty of trusting old friends when envy or ambition can so easily eclipse honour. Harold Harefoot's shadow grows, his influence weaves through Denmark and England alike. Even those uncertain of his claim hesitate, fearing the consequences of allegiance revealed to the wrong ear. The struggle for power has no clear victor, only casualties and haunted dreams. Through all the tension, a single truth emerges. Nothing stays hidden for long. Secrets leak as swiftly as spilled mead, and those who sit silent today may shout tomorrow. The realm's destiny hangs in the balance. The unravelling web tightens around every decision. Harthacnut must choose which pieces of truth to believe, and which betrayals to forgive or avenge. His crown rests not upon his brow, but upon the shifting loyalties of those around him. With every passing day, the difference between friend and foe dulls beneath the weight of suspicion. Harthacnut finds himself pacing the lonely halls, questioning whether any relationship is built upon trust or upon fear. Meanwhile, Harold Harefoot's supporters grow in numbers and resolve, eager for open confrontation. As the web unravels, so too does the notion that peace will easily return, for when power is at stake, every bond is fragile. The final days of this chapter are filled with omens: the howl of wind through battlements, sudden absences at council, messages lost in transit. The king looks to his dwindling circle and wonders if by tomorrow even these faces will shift with the tides of ambition. Against the uncertainty, Harthacnut steels his resolve, prepared now for the trials that may follow, knowing that the web tightening around him may snap or strangle at any moment. Amid these shadows of suspicion and alliances torn asunder, the seeds for the next struggle are sown. As Harthacnut faces the mounting pressure from rivals and the realm itself, both Denmark and England await a verdict only fate can deliver. The story is not yet finished. Every silent corridor and broken wax seal testifies to the uncertainty that rules when royalty falters. The nation holds its breath, unsure who will emerge as master of the unravelling web. Chapter 4. Imperiled Thrones. Across the windswept North Sea, a kingdom trembles. In Denmark, Prince Harthacnut's ambitions are shackled as Scandinavian unrest erupts around him. Far away in England, a bold move unfolds. Harold Harefoot, cunning and resolute, seizes the vacant throne. Shadows deepen within candlelit halls, and the fate of 2 crowns dangles by a fraying thread. The struggle for power is only just beginning, and uncertainty reigns supreme. Darkness cloaks royal councils as anxious voices echo through corridors. Harthacnut sits among his advisers, faces flickering in wavering candlelight, each man burdened by unease. News travels swiftly. Harold's coronation has cast a long shadow across England. Harthacnut's allies whisper of betrayal and plots unfurling. Every choice grows fraught. With the throne slipping from his grasp, the young king must navigate storms both political and personal, his destiny hanging in the balance. In Denmark, unrest simmers like a storm just beneath the horizon. Nobles gather in dim-lit chambers, murmuring dissent. Harthacnut feels the sharp weight of his father's legacy and the expectation of his Scandinavian lords. Each day, a messenger arrives with grim tidings, villagers rebellious, rivals covetous. The young ruler's brow furrows as the gulf between duty and desire widens. Somewhere across the sea, a rival sits cloaked in English tapestry and new authority. Meanwhile, Harold Harefoot's grip on England tightens. His coronation, attended by wary nobles, is a spectacle of forced smiles and defensive glances. In the great hall, whispers of legitimacy fuel suspicion, yet Harold's clemency and calculation earn him unlikely support. Behind shuttered doors, Anglo-Saxon courtiers debate their loyalty to the reigning king across the sea, or to the man before them promising stability. The country holds its breath, caught between allegiance and ambition. Tension crackles around the royal council tables. Harthacnut's trusted advisers lay out perilous options: muster the fleets for war, forge new alliances, or bide time and scheme. With each flicker of the candle, Denmark's prospects grow dimmer. In the silence, the North's ancient sagas echo. Fate, uncertain and merciless, pursues every king. Harthacnut's decisions require icy composure, for any misstep now could seal the doom of both his reign and his royal line. In England's smoky halls, Harold faces incessant challenges to his rule. Messages from Normandy, silent glances from powerful earls, and the omnipresent memory of Cnut heave tension onto Harold's every move. Taverns and churches alike buzz with speculation about Harthacnut's return, but for now, the new king remains unchallenged. Yet, a sense of foreboding permeates the kingdom. Civil war feels closely a sharp knife just out of sight, glinting at the edges of every conversation. Candle flames waver as midnight descends. Harthacnut paces beneath carved timbers, haunted by ghosts of both kin and crown. Doubt gnaws at his resolve. He recalls his mother Emma's warnings and the hard-won unity of his father's rule. Across the water, Harold consolidates his power, dispatching envoys and seeking favour among the great families. The separation between brothers is now wider than the North Sea. Each step, each hour brings them closer to irrevocable conflict. Every decision now carries dire consequences. Should Harthacnut risk his weakened position in Denmark to reclaim his English throne? Or should he fortify his Scandinavian hold and trust fortunes to shift? Trusted retainers voice urgent advice. Some argue for negotiation, others for war. Yet all recognize the hour is desperate. Even the most steadfast supporters glance over their shoulders, wary of shifting loyalties. The court's candlelight becomes a fragile sanctuary against encroaching darkness. Meanwhile, the English people grow restless. Uncertainty breeds rumours. Some whisper Harthacnut will soon land with a fleet. Others claim he's abandoned England forever. Wheat merchants, village priests, even London's craftsmen catch news from the north with growing anxiety. Harold's men patrol the streets with steely purpose, yet behind closed doors support for the new king remains fragile. The question looming everywhere, whose crown is it truly to claim? In the shadowed inner chamber, Harthacnut confronts a difficult truth. The resources he once relied upon are drained by constant unrest and Norse rivals. Each promise made to loyalists comes at a higher cost. Candlelight plays over maps of England and Denmark, his fingers tracing possible invasion routes. Every glare and hint of treason presses him further toward a pivotal choice. Time narrows, the fate of two kingdoms weighs on every hour's passing. Political intrigue snakes through both courts. Old friends become uneasy allies. Ancient hostilities surface anew. In Denmark, factions of the nobility test Harthacnut's patience and strength, negotiating with veiled threats and measured silence. In England, Harold relies on advisers wary of foreign rule, some quietly hoping Harthacnut falters. The air in both lands is heavy with the scent of betrayal, expectation, and the unspoken promise of violence. History will remember each man's cunning or his failure. Night after night, Harthacnut's sleep is shallow and haunted. He dreams of storm-driven ships, brothers in arms, and cities set ablaze. Even in daylight, uncertainty stalks his every conversation. Messengers linger, delaying news that grows bleaker by the day. The tension fractures friendships, and family bonds stretch to breaking. Across the sea, Harold walks the same restless path, haunted by the spectre of the absent prince and the shadow of battle not yet fought. Councils in both kingdoms become arenas of treachery and hope. In Denmark, fiery arguments over resources and loyalty threaten to splinter even Harthacnut's inner circle. In England, the whisper of foreign swords makes the hair of every noble stand on end. Allies are counted and recounted, enemies measured for strength and ambition. In dim chambers, battle lines form not only between England and Denmark, but within each royal house as well. Despite mounting challenges, both rulers cling to their claims. Harthacnut steels himself, knowing that each decision closes some doors forever. Harold, meanwhile, must guard his newly won throne, even as doubts swirl around him. The spectre of civil war looms above both courts, its shadow lengthening as unrest continues. Flickering candlelight cannot dispel the darkness of uncertain futures. In an era when every crown was forged in fire, these kings face their greatest tests yet. On cold dawns, Denmark's harbours fill with wary soldiers and oarsmen. Each man senses the tension radiating from their young king. Harthacnut appears at the docks, resolute yet distant, issuing orders to prepare ships and secure the coastlines. A gusty wind sweeps the banners, mingling salt and fear in the air. Even the sea seems apprehensive, awaiting the clash it knows is coming. The threads connecting Denmark and England grow ever tauter with every passing day. In England, loyalists to Harthacnut gather secretly, plotting to undermine Harold's rule from within. Moonlit meetings behind alehouse doors echo with vows of allegiance and whispered warnings. English lords who prospered under Cnut's dynasty weigh the risks of resistance versus submission. As spies and informers fan out, trust becomes a rare and dangerous commodity. Every shadow holds a secret. No one is certain where the next betrayal or alliance will emerge, nor whose life will be changed by dawn. Against a backdrop of battered banners and uneasy silence, Harold's court celebrates with forced merriment and calculated displays of strength. Lavish feasts conceal sharp undercurrents of paranoia. Nobles toast their new king, raising goblets while never quite meeting each other's eyes. Outside, the common folk sense the unease. For all the pageantry, the land remains unsettled. Its peace balanced on the ambitions of two divided brothers, each determined to outlast the other or perish in the attempt. Candlelight flickers in Denmark's royal chapel as Harthacnut seeks solace. Kneeling alone, he prays for guidance, his voice barely a whisper. Ancient runes carved into chapel stones offer little comfort as unrest circles the throne. The king's prayers are as much for his own uncertain heart as for victory. Beyond the chapel walls, the sounds of dissent rise. Inside his soul, the conflict between fear and fury grows more consuming with each passing prayer. Advisers urge Harthacnut to act decisively. Time and patience are running thin. He must decide, attempt a daring crossing to reclaim his birthright in England, or strengthen his fragile grasp on Denmark. Some urge him to send emissaries, others whisper of midnight sails and surprise invasions. Each plan teeters on a knife edge, trusting fortune and faith more than certainty. The king weighs every risk while the heartbeats of his countrymen echo his own mounting anxiety. On distant hillsides, English peasants gather around flickering fires, repeating news in hushed tones. Some believe Harold is but a caretaker, waiting for the rightful king's return. Others see Harold as a symbol of change, perhaps even hope. As night deepens and storm clouds gather overhead, the nation lies divided, holding its collective breath. The promise of peace seems as fragile as a candle's flame, threatened by every gust of rumour and ambition blowing through the land. From Denmark to England, every courtier senses history's weight. Chancellors pore over letters, seals broken in haste revealing plots and counterplots. The threat of armed conflict moves with the tide. The smallest misstep could unleash chaos. While kings weigh war and peace, families cling to ancient loyalties and new fears. Flickering candlelight cannot conceal the anxiety reflected on anxious faces. Each night, the peril facing both thrones grows, and the outcome remains shrouded in uncertainty. As winter approaches, time grows short for decisive action. Harthacnut's counsellors warn that hesitation breeds enemies, and a single season could change the fate of kingdoms. Letters smuggled on creaking ships plead for support, but every promise is tinged with desperation. The king's burdens increase even as his options narrow. Across the sea, Harold prepares for any challenge, wary of invasion yet emboldened by his new crown. The realms teeter, bracing for the coming storm. Torches illuminate the path to Harthacnut's council chamber one final night. The young king gathers his most trusted men, voices lowered by the gravity of their meeting. All speak plainly. War risks everything, yet to wait is to concede defeat. The council lingers deep into the night. Faces once certain now betray fear, ambition, and resignation. Before dawn, a decision is reached. History records its choices in blood and memory, and both thrones stand imperiled by what comes next. The chapter closes on flickering candlelight and silent anticipation. Across Denmark and England, kings, courtiers, and commoners alike await the outcome of choices made in darkness. Each face, young and old, loyal and treacherous, reflects the gravity of these tense days. The threat of civil war casts a long shadow. Harthacnut's future and the fate of two kingdoms hang poised above a precipice, each heartbeat measuring the seconds before swords are drawn or peace is shattered. Chapter 5. Return across the narrow sea. The wind howled across the deck as Harthacnut stood at the prow, cloaks snapping behind him. Behind him, Norse and Saxon warriors pressed against the rail, faces pale as the mist that blanketed the restless water. Every man's eyes were fixed on the rippling haze ahead, where England's shadowy coast seemed to float between worlds familiar yet distant after so many years gone. The salt spray stung as night deepened. Torches flickered along the rowboats bobbing in the inky waves, casting odd, wavering shapes on drawn faces. Rain drummed soft rhythms on wooden shields. All sense of time blurred, broken only by a whispered prayer or a sudden cry from the crow's nest. Each roll of the ship was heavy with longing and a tension that seemed to stretch far beyond the horizon itself. The hush was broken by gulls wheeling overhead, their calls sharp in the damp air. Saxons with memories of home shivered beside Norse mercenaries, united in their anticipation. Harthacnut's breath misted before him as he silently watched the coastline take shape. The England he had left was changed, uncertain, restless, filled with rumours of new loyalties and old resentments. Still, hope burned, steady and stubborn, amidst the churn of fear. On the ship's deck, oarsmen worked in rhythmic silence, their backs slick with sweat despite the cold. Above them, banners snapped in the wind. old symbols barely visible through the gathering fog. The king's advisers clustered close, sharing low, urgent words. The weight of years in exile hung heavy over them all, as if the sea itself pressed them toward whatever fate waited on those shrouded beaches. Hour by hour, the light shifted from black to bruised blue as dawn threatened the horizon. The water glowed with the reflection of torches clutched by sentries and hopeful returnees. Swords and axes lay ready, though no battle was yet declared. Harthacnut traced the outline of the coast with his eyes, seeking the landmarks of memory against the strange contours wrought by absence and time. A shudder ran through the deck as the keel scraped shallow. The king's heart pounded in rhythm with the beating oars. Whispers passed down the line. "There, can you see it?" A torch arced high, painting figures in gold along the shoreline. Some knelt, pressing their faces to the wood, whispering blessings for safe passage and a peaceful landing. Even the bravest felt the edge of fear's cold grip that morning. Harthacnut's hands gripped the rails as the ship slid into the cove, shielded from the open sea by cliffs and ancient trees. The mist seemed alive, parting just enough to reveal shapes moving on the beach watchers or welcome, no one could say. The silence thickened, broken only by the water slapping against hulls and the distant sound of a horn blown in warning, or perhaps in wary greeting. Men leapt from the boats, boots sinking into shifting sand. The shore, once a memory, felt real beneath their feet in a yielding cold, alive with promise and peril. There were torches along the dunes, and the smell of earth replaced the endless brine of crossing. Harthacnut stood a moment longer at the water's edge, the first to arrive, fighting the ache of old wounds and the fear of what new ones might come. The company moved up from the beach, past embers of long-dead campfires and the faint tracks of animals turning in the night. Their armour clinked softly, muffled by layers of wool and leather hardened by travel. Harthacnut's banner was hoisted, the dragon crest visible despite the gloom. It fluttered as the first sign of royal return, a promise to followers and a challenge to any who doubted his claim to the throne. Rain began to fall in earnest as the procession wound inland. Wet grass yielded under heavy boots. Every step was measured, as if the land itself might reject them after so many years away. Saxons muttered about omens, Norsemen about tides and fate, but all kept moving, drawn forward by the sight of crumbled stone and the faint smoke that marked distant villages' ghosts of a kingdom almost within reach. Somewhere ahead, messengers ran to alert the living, and the loyaler king arrived, but England was changed. Harthacnut rode at the fore now, grey cloak soaking up rain and memory. Old allies waited in silence. Hidden eyes watched from ruins grown thick with ivy. The king's thoughts raced. What welcome would he find? Was it loyalty or resentment that grew these many long years in his absence? Along narrow forest paths, the returning column encountered the signs of wars. Slow decay collapsed cottages, burnt-out threshing circles, stone walls half swallowed by moss. Every scar was a reminder of lost time and lost rule. Harthacnut pressed on, face set, each stride pulled between the hope of healing and the dread of what old wounds might be reopened with his return to the kingdom. By midday, the mist retreated, revealing rolling fields green with early summer. The king's party paused atop a low rise, gazing over a countryside both familiar and strange. Saxons murmured the names of villages lost or changed. Norse warriors studied the horizon for threats unseen. The bridge between past and present was fragile here, tested with every cautious step taken toward a new reign. As the riders crossed narrow streams and forded muddy hollows, children gathered at the edges of their path, watching in silent wonder. Some broke into nervous smiles, waving sprigs of blossom or clutching mothers' hands. Others clung close, wary tales of kings and battles living on in frightened eyes. Harthacnut offered a nod, grave but gentle, paying silent tribute to the people he was sworn to serve. Scouts returned with scraps of news estates either razed or ready to renew their oaths, noble lords waiting with uncertainty. In candle-lit halls just beyond the next bend, allies prepared words of welcome or resistance. The king listened, weighing each missive against the bitter lessons of his exile. Every word, every silence was thick with meaning on this day of his homecoming. The procession halted near a ruined watchtower, crumbled stone and wild flowers marking the place where sentries once kept vigil. Harthacnut dismounted, kneeling briefly in the grass, both prayer and silent remembrance. Around him, warriors formed a protective ring, silent, watchful. The old boundaries between Norseman and Saxon faded for a moment, joined in shared purpose and the quiet awe of returning to what had long been lost. As noon faded, the king's party drew near to the river marking England's sacred line. The water pulsed dark and smooth, whispering of old secrets and fresh beginnings. Church bells tolled in the distance, echoing across woods and over fields. Harthacnut pressed his hand to his chest, breath catching this river crossing, like the one just survived at sea, would define the terms of his reign from this moment onward. The First Lords arrived in sombre procession, each bearing the marks of long conflict. Faces lined with grief, pride still burning in hard eyes. Harthacnut greeted them with measured warmth, his voice carrying the weight of return and the echo of exile. Pledges were renewed, some eager, others hesitant, but the ritual was the same, the promise binding old wounds to new hopes as England's halls opened again to their king. In the gathering dusk, feasting fires flickered alive in the great courtyard of the nearest hall. Harthacnut entered, passing beneath a carved stone arch, dripping rain and silence alike. Hall servants glanced up with unreadable expressions. Tables bowed with bread, meat, and pitchers of rough cider. Every gesture, every greeting, bore a question. Would this king restore the joys of old, or conjure new shadows with his rule? Or conjure new shadows with his rule? That night, tales were spun by firelight, the king listening intently to each story of loyalty lost and found, of homes rebuilt from ruin. Nobles and churls alike watched Harthacnut, searching for sign, strength, mercy, the scars of exile. Every laugh and lifted cup weighed heavy. The king was home, but to a realm he barely recognized, as wild with possibility as it was haunted by memory and uncertainty. Alone at a window, Harthacnut looked out across soaked roofs and tangled hedgerows. Rain caught the torchlight, silvering each droplet as if blessing or warning. The king's mind drifted to the faces lost at sea, the allies won and enemies made in his absence. He vowed quietly to root his reign in the lessons of this journey, every hardship, every homecoming, forging a new path for England's uncertain future. Later, as candles guttered low, the king addressed his closest advisers. His words were careful, each syllable weighed against the hush outside the walls. They spoke of taxes, alliances, and the wary loyalty of lords left too long to their own devices. Yet beneath every plan, the question lingered: how to heal a kingdom fractured by old rivalries and the silence of years scattered across stormy seas and foreign coasts. Thunder rumbled across the horizon, echoing through the night. Some believed it an omen, a sign that Harthacnut's return would not go unchallenged, that the past was not easily set aside. The king did not dismiss their fears. Instead, he gathered the nobles by the hearth, urging unity. For England to heal, all must share in its burdens, forging new loyalty through trial, not just through ancient blood or solemn vow. As night closed in, England's king wrapped his cloak tighter, heartbeat slow but steady. Beyond stone walls and rain-lashed fields, church bells tolled the late hour. Inside, followers drifted to uneasy sleep haunted by hope, shaped by scars. The torchlight faded, leaving royal halls in shadow, but Harthacnut's journey across dark water and lost years burned bright within him, a promise, home at last, whatever dawn might bring. Chapter 6. The King's Burden. Harthacnut's reign began not with joy, but with a heaviness that seemed to settle over the kingdom like a winter fog. He walked through candle-lit halls, shadows clinging to every corner, and found suspicion lurking in every whispered word. The scars left by Harold's rule still lingered, etching lines of mistrust deep within the people, and stirring ancient rivalries that refused to quiet. Each night, inside his smoky council chambers, Harthacnut faced the silent resentment of nobles who questioned his every decree. Some remembered a time before his father's conquests, or cherished loyalties to Harold, now gone. Every audience was strained, tension visible in the set jaws and lowered eyes of those around him. The king's crown felt heavier by the day, as unrest simmered beneath England's fragile calm. The kingdom's coffers, depleted by years of strife, forced Harthacnut into an unpopular choice. Heavy taxes were demanded to fund his Danish mercenaries' personal army, ever watchful for revolt. Villagers and townsfolk grumbled as tax collectors arrived, their presence a bitter reminder that peace was still paid for by the common man. The echoes of anger and hardship followed every coin exchanged in the faint morning light. Harthacnut's court became a place of whispered plots and measured glances. In crowded feasting halls trust was scarce. The king listened closely, knowing well that the loyalty of those around him could shift like wind caught in a tapestry. He sought strength in tradition, but found only the cold comfort of history, as old scars between Dane and Saxon split wider with every passing moon. Legend speaks of Harthacnut's uneasy alliance with his Anglo-Saxon half-brother Edward, the man history would remember as the Confessor. Edward's silence was more piercing than any accusation, his scrutiny calm but constant. At the edge of every council, Edward stood as a reminder of England's divided Sula realm still haunted by the rival claims of two royal lineages, uncertain of its future beneath the king's troubled reign. In the flicker of candlelight, Harthacnut weighed every decision, burdened by the knowledge that goodwill had never come easily in this land. He paced long corridors, haunted by the memory of blood spilled and by the realization that every order, every new tax, risked reigniting the embers of rebellion. The sense of isolation grew sharper, a chill that followed him, no matter how many torches he lit. Outside the palace, word of the bitter taxes spread quickly, fueling discontent from the shadowy streets of London to the storm-tossed shores of the north. People gathered in alehouses and fields, sharing wary glances and hushed rumours. Once loyal Thangans began weighing their allegiance, while some whispered that the king's rule stood on sand. In the air hung a question: how long could Harthacnut hold the kingdom together? Inside his chambers, the king's sleep was restless, dreams turning to nightmares of uprising and betrayal. He awoke before dawn, the taste of unrest bitter on his tongue. By morning he donned his regal cloak with a kind of resignation, as if each day he wore it more for armour than for ceremony. The throne brought little comfort, its carved oak felt as cold and unyielding as the burdens he bore. Between Harthacnut and his people, an invisible gulf grew wider with every passing season. He rode out on royal processions, hoping to demonstrate strength, but found only weary faces lining the muddy roads. Children and elders alike turned away, careful not to meet the king's gaze. For Harthacnut, each journey through his own land became a grim paradia procession of ghosts from a fractured past. Edward, steadfast and watchful, lingered quietly at court. He offered polite counsel only when asked, but nothing escaped his notice. Some saw in him the future of England, a return to an older, more familiar rule. Others feared that his mere presence alongside Harthacnut fed the storm of rivalry stalking the palace. Around every banquet and council, two destinies seemed to circle, each wary of the other's shadow. As spring turned to summer, the mood among Harthacnut's nobles grew tense. Feasts were subdued, their laughter brittle, candles burning lower as the night deepened. Anxieties multiplied quietly. The king's harsh taxation and reliance on his foreign retinue left many English lords feeling unmoored, as if the realm itself drifted between storms, waiting for some event that would decide its fate. Small acts of rebellion began to flicker in distant shires' refusals to pay taxes, sullen defiance in local courts. Messengers brought grim tidings from the countryside, their faces pale with worry. Harthacnut listened in silence, tracing maps with his trembling fingers, struggling to decide which threats were real and which were merely the imaginings of a people poisoned by fear. His patience wore thin, and trust faded quickly. The king often retreated to the solitude of his private chapel. Here, beneath stone arches humming with ancient prayers, Harthacnut searched for solace in ritual. Yet even in this sacred space the world intruded, the weight of his crown pressed against his brow, the memory of his father's wars echoing in the flickering light. The responsibility to restore England's peace felt nearly impossible to bear. Meanwhile, Edward became a subtle presence in local affairs. He visited abbeys and villages, exchanging words with monks and the gentry. His gentle demeanour earned quiet respect, and stories of his softness grew. Yet beneath this calm there was a sharp intelligence. Edward was watching, learning, and waiting. In the fractured realm he moved like a shadow, neither rival nor ally, but always a reminder of what England could become. Reports of brewing discontent reached the king's advisers with growing frequency. Some blamed foreign soldiers for the unrest. Others whispered about the people's lingering affection for the Anglo-Saxon past. Every meeting seemed longer than the last, punctuated by raised voices and fearful glances. Harthacnut, worn and weary, sensed that his kingdom was slipping through his fingers, one taxed coin and angry curse at a time. One evening, during a feast lit by hundreds of wavering flames, Harthacnut tried to rally his supporters. He raised a cup, offering words of unity and hope. Yet around the table few eyes sparkled with sincerity. The echoes of his speech drifted away, lost amid the clink of dishes and the murmured doubts that haunted every meal. Feasts designed for celebration became occasions for suspicion, with every guest guarding his thoughts carefully. Outside, the people's anger boiled over on occasion endless taxes, and harsh enforcers drove some to open resistance. A handful of villagers barred the king's collectors, threatening violence against those who pressed them too far. Harthacnut's Danish mercenaries, quick to act, crushed these flickers of defiance with grim efficiency. But every violent reprisal deepened the sense of separation between the throne and the land it claimed to protect. In the weeks that followed, the court became a theatre of nerves. Eyes darted from guest to guest, searching for signs of treason or loyalty. Wordless tension stretched across every conversation. Harthacnut sensed the change, his supporters growing fewer, his detractors bold. The castle's thick stone walls seemed to close inward, trapping each breath in a web spun from mistrust and old resentments. Storm clouds gathered above the uneasy kingdom. In private, Harthacnut's heart ached for simpler times, for laughter and loyalty that once stitched the kingdom together. Now he found only the echo of lost allies, of friendships broken by the cruelty of rule. He wrote letters late into the night, pleading for patience and wisdom, hoping that daylight would soften the people's anger. The shadows never truly lifted. Sorrow became his constant companion as days blurred quietly into nights. Edward's composed silence remained unbroken. When tempers flared in council, his calm gaze quieted the storm. Those who listened carefully caught the wisdom under his mild words, a master of patience amid the kingdom's chaos. Many now watched Edward, seeing a gentle hand that might steer England out of turmoil. Whether he wished it or not, Edward's presence became a gathering point for those who longed for peace after years of unrest. As autumn approached, the nights grew longer, and the mood in the kingdom darkened still further. Harthacnut wandered his halls, haunted by the weight of hopes he could not fulfill. He hoped desperately for a sign that his reign could mend broken trust. Yet even as the leaves fell and the air chilled, the burden only seemed to grow. The king's sorrow deepened with every passing dire ruler at war with shadows, searching for light. The struggle between Dane and Saxon reached a silent climax within the palace itself. The king's council split into quiet factions, some favouring Harthacnut's strength, others drawn to Edward's patience. Neither man wished for open conflict, but beneath the candlelit calm, every decision carried the risk of tearing England deeper apart. History awaited their next moves, uncertain whether the crown would unite the land or finally break it in two. Through these troubled months, England's fate trembled on the edge. Harthacnut's rule was marked not only by the burdens he inherited, but by those he could not lay down. Rebellion simmered, and the people's faith faded along with the summer sun. Each hour demanded grit and sacrifice, every day filled with choices too heavy for any one man. Still the king pressed forward, held up by stubborn will and a hope not yet extinguished. By winter, an uneasy stillness settled over the kingdom. Harthacnut's burdens had changed him, deepening the lines on his face, drawing shadow beneath his eyes. Edward, ever silent, remained at his side, a presence both soothing and unsettling. The uneasy peace could not last, but for a moment the storm held its breath. The king's burden would soon reach its end, and with it the fate of England would turn anew. Chapter 7. The Bitter Feast. In a grand oak hall, the air shimmered with the golden light of dozens of candles. The feast had reached its height, laughter bouncing off hammered shields and banners fluttering overhead. Courtiers raised goblets etched with ancient runes, the scent of roasted meats mingling with sweet honeyed wine. But amidst the revelry, quieter currents stirred furtive glances and whispered bargains, invisible threads tightening beneath the surface. A hush falls as Harthacnut, England's beleaguered king, stands to address his assembled guests. His voice is strong, echoing over the gathered lords and nobles. Silver platters brimming with spiced fowl and boar are carried between tables, the crackle of the hearth fire painting dancing shadows on the stone walls. Eyes follow the king's every movement, some filled with respect, others perhaps with calculation. Harthacnut lifts his goblet, froth spilling from golden brim to beard. He calls for a toast honouring the bride, the groom, and the fragile peace their union represents. In that moment, suspicion flickers in the eyes of rival claimants. The king's words are met with forced smiles, clinking cups echoing like distant thunder. None can know that these celebrations will soon be stained by tragedy and remembered for generations. The revellers eat and drink with abandon, oblivious to the growing sense of dread that infiltrates the hall. Beyond the laughter, high voices murmur in corners, exchanging secrets hushed beneath the hum of the crowd. Harthacnut, red-cheeked and flushed with wine, throws his head back in laughter, but some at the table watch him with sharp, cold interest. The scent of conspiracy mixes silently with the perfume of blooming herbs. Suddenly, in the midst of a roaring jest, Harthacnut's face contorts in pain. The laughter dies instantly as his cup falls from his hand, spilling sticky mead across embroidered linen. Silence crushes the room, noblemen and servants alike frozen in disbelief. Time seems to bend, stretching the moment endlessly as Harthacnut gasps for air, eyes wide with shock. The king's fate hangs in the stillness, sensed but not yet accepted. Chairs scrape back hastily as advisers rush to their sovereign's side. Panic unspools across the crowd, transforming celebration to chaos. The music falters and dies, replaced by shouts and the hurried footsteps of those desperate to help or to distance themselves. Some guests whisper prayers, clutching amulets in trembling hands. Others exchange loaded glances, calculating what this disaster might mean for their own ambitions. The hall trembles with uncertainty as Harthacnut collapses. His mother's wails pierce the thick silence, echoing off the stone like a damning prophecy. One nobleman mutters an old Norse incantation seeking protection from dark omens. The king's face turns an ashen grey, and already courtiers begin whispering accusations. Was this fate or foul play beneath gilded banners? The wedding feast teeters on the edge of memory and myth. A physician hurries forward, his robe sweeping the rushes as he kneels beside the king. He searches for the faintest breath, for hope among shadows. A lady faints nearby, overcome by the shock. The golden platters grow cold as fear settles over the guests. Around the king, hands trembling, some begin to recall murmured half-threats and the knowing nods shared earlier. Suspicion clouds the flickering torchlight. An eerie quiet claims the room, broken only by scattered sobs. Outside, the wind howls at the shutters as if mourning with those inside. The bride stands motionless, tears glistening on her cheeks, her wedding dreams washed away in seconds. All eyes return to Harthacnut's still form. Courtiers begin to realize that, whatever the cause, nothing in England will ever be quite the same after this night. Soft footsteps retreat as the king is carried away, shielded by faltering dignity. Whispers fill the gap he leaves behind, suspicions swirling like wood smoke. Some recall the old tensions simmering between Danish and English factions, each side eager for advantage. In torchlight's uncertain glow, alliances begin to shift. More than a life has ended, the future of the kingdom hangs by a thread, stretched taut by uncertainty and ambition. A sharp-eyed earl leans into a conspirator's ear, voice low and urgent. Even as Harthacnut's body is borne away, the business of power resumes. The spilled wine stains not only the linens but the very memory of the realm. What truly transpired? Guests debate in urgent whispers poison or fate. Rival houses weigh opportunity and risk. The atmosphere thickens with anticipation of what sun and rumour may reveal at dawn. Meanwhile, servants hurry to clear away the remnants of the feast, their hands shaking. Gold-encrusted platters are spirited out of sight, and uneaten meat grows cold where it lies abandoned. Guests cluster in small knots, faces drawn with anxiety. Some remember the king's last words, searching for hidden meaning. Though fear dominates, cautious hope flickers among those whose fortunes may yet rise from these ashes. Outside the hall, guards redouble their watch, casting wary glances at any who approach. The air is sharp with the scent of damp earth and torch oil. Messengers mount their horses, spurring them into the night. News of the king's collapse will soon ride across England. Within castle walls, ambitious hearts beat loudly. The race to claim influence and shape the future begins, even before Harthacnut's fate is fully known. In the courtyard, a tapestry of rumours unravels as guests recount events in hurried tones. Some point to the king's notorious excess at table, others to jealous rivals lurking at the fringes. Old wounds between the houses of Denmark and Wessex re-emerge in heated debate. Above, the moon is veiled in clouds, casting an ominous pall over the revellers. The bitter feast becomes legend even as the night drags onward. Within the private chambers, Harthacnut lies pale and unmoving, surrounded by trembling servants and wary nobles. A priest bends in prayer, murmuring rites to ease a restless soul. Family members struggle to hide their grief and their apprehension. Some already measure the weight of crowns and the reach of royal blood. Personal loyalties and secret resentments now come to the fore, promising fresh intrigue and uncertainty. The bride's family gathers quietly, whispering fears about the marriage's ruined future. Their alliance, meant to bring peace, now seems overshadowed by loss. Elder matrons dab their eyes, recalling old prophecies that warned of turmoil and sudden death. The meaning of the feast is transformed, no longer a union, but an omen. In the distance, tolling bells mark the hour, each note heavy with foreboding. Later, as night deepens, rival factions meet in shadowed alcoves. Words are chosen with care, each phrase a test of loyalty and intent. The hall that rang with laughter now echoes with fear and ambition. Names are spoken in whispers. Edward, Godwin, MH, a player in the looming contest for the throne. The king's collapse, mysterious and sudden, sets old wounds bleeding and ambitions burning anew. The priest emerges, delivering grave news. Harthacnut shows no sign of recovery. In the haunted silence, the queen's attendants draw close, forming a quiet shield around her. The doctors confess their confusion. Was it poison or some divine reckoning for past deeds? The uncertainty is almost worse than the grief. Nobles begin to tally their fortunes, weighing risks and dreaming of crowns that might soon change hands. Medieval rumour is as swift as it is cruel. By midnight, word spreads across the city. At alehouses and palisades alike, speculation grows. Some blame the strange foreign wines, others the bitter rivalries bubbling beneath courtly custom. Those who witness the feast embellish the tale, painting scenes of treachery and woe. Already the story of the bitter feast gathers the contours of myth where truth and legend entwine. As dawn nears, flickering torchlight reveals pale faces and hollow eyes. Those who benefited from the king's goodwill now fear for their futures, while others allow the faintest hints of satisfaction to creep into their expressions. Sleep eludes the castle. History begins to take shape in restless whispers and hastily penned letters. With Harthacnut's fate in doubt, every alliance must be questioned, every secret kept close. In the shadows beyond the banquet hall, Edward the Confessor's name rises in quiet conversations. Heir or usurper, victim or victor, his part in the tumult remains uncertain. Those loyal to his cause sense opportunity, while others cling to hope that order might yet be restored. Old enmities surface as lords recall grievances forgotten in peacetime. The bitter feast marks not just an ending, but a volatile beginning. As day finally breaks, Harthacnut's legacy lies in ruins among toppled goblets and wilted garlands. The scent of honeyed wine lingers, mingled with the memory of fear. Courtiers avoid the empty throne, wary of what claiming it may cost. In the cold morning light, rumours grow into certainty. England stands at the crossroads of fate. The bitter feast will be spoken of in hushed voices for centuries to come. Those who witness the feast blink at the rising sun, forever changed by what they have seen. Some conceal scars that will shape destinies, others nurture ambitions fanned by the king's fall. In the stories told hereafter, laughter and terror will forever intertwine beneath the haunted arches of the great hall. Power has shifted, quietly and irrevocably, as England stumbles into a new chapter. Even as the feast's echoes fade, questions linger: who truly profited from the king's tragedy? Did ambition or fate guide that fatal cup? These mysteries ripple outward, darkening alliances and colouring every word, every glance. Harthacnut's reign ends not with a sword, but with a toast gone bitter. The throne of England waits, restless. History remembers the feast, and the kingdom that changed forever beneath its flickering candles. Chapter 8, Whispers and Widows' Veils. The echo of Harthacnut's death had barely faded when veils descended across the royal halls. Mourners carried flickering candles, their faces pale with shock and suspicion. Behind heavy doors, hushed voices wound through chilled stone corridors. Some whispered of poison, others of a curse. Grief mixed with unease, settling like a lingering fog. Outside, the winds carried rumours deeper than grief itself. Chilling every listening heart, the winds carried rumours deep as thought. Under the draped black banners, the court's sorrow seemed deeper than ritual mourning. Silent processions glided past the throne, every step heavy with apprehension. The air sizzled with hidden fears. Had the king fallen to fate, or to a shadow lurking among them? Courtiers' eyes flickered with doubt as each prayed for safety and watched their neighbours' hands. The queen's weeping was sincere, but even her tears hid trembling uncertainty. Along every cloister and winding passage, the glow of candlelight trembled. Servants hurried with lowered eyes, wary of unseen watchers. Every whispered conversation brimmed with questions: who would gain most from the king's sudden end? Could any meal or cup be trusted? At night the tapers burned late. Nobles gathered in private, voices hushed as they recounted every sign and superstition. The kingdom's hush grew heavier with every hour. As the rituals for the dead unfolded, memories of Harthacnut's final night danced uneasily in the candlelight. Some recalled laughter and music, others a flash of pain across the king's face. Musicians played quietly, their melodies mingling with distant sobs. The weight of legacy pressed hard, and with each passing bell toll, suspicion seeped deeper into the royal marrow. No one dared speak openly, yet everyone wondered who truly mourned and who waited. The queen sat veiled behind a curtain, draped in mourning black. Her lips quivered as nobles filed past, but tears fell silently, betraying both heartbreak and fear. She clutched a single white lily, a symbol of grief, or perhaps innocence. All saw the shadow in her eyes as glances darted between widow and throne. With Harthacnut gone, alliances shifted swiftly, and every look or gesture became a clue in a tightening web of intrigue. By torchlight, messengers slipped quietly through echoing corridors. They carried secret letters sealed in wax, destined for powerful hands outside the palace. Each note brought fresh ripples of anxiety, alliances forged, betrayals weighed, favours bargained in desperate whispers. The sudden void at the crown's heart beckoned old rivals. In the night, sharper words and sharper blades became equally dangerous. The fate of kingdoms, it seemed, could change with a single secret passed in the dark. Edward the Confessor, tall and silent, walked the corridors under the watchful eyes of the grieving court. His gaze was thoughtful, his presence deliberate, commanding attention even in silence. Whispers gathered around him, the returning exile, now closer to England's throne than he had ever been. With each passing day, his aura grew, cool and ghostly, more feared, perhaps, than loved. Around him, rivals measured their words and ambitions carefully. Around Edward, rival claimants and old enemies gathered in subtle knots. Some offered tentative support, while others quietly sought ways to undermine him. Ancient grudges and faded loyalties awakened in the candlelit gloom. Edward met each interaction with a nod, his own expressions hard to read. The very walls seemed to tense in anticipation of power's next move, as every noble weighed new risks and opportunities among the shadows of death and destiny. In the midnight hush, the court's fears found strange shapes. Old prophecies were muttered, and some swore omens had warned them of approaching doom. A crow had circled the tower, a cup had shattered just before the fatal toast. Monks and seers were summoned, their words vague but unsettling. The kingdom teetered on a knife's edge, faith and suspicion locking in silent combat, while the living imagined ghosts crowding every room. Within lantern-lit chambers, widows and noblewomen gathered, cloaked in sorrow and uncertainty. Some wept for personal loss, others plotted futures beneath their veils. They exchanged worried glances, knowing how swiftly widowhood could make a pawn or a power. Their whispered counsel braided ambition to grief, even as they spun tales of curses and secrets in the name of self-preservation. The balance of influence was more precarious than ever before. Old advisers, trembling and grey, shuffled through the palace's deepest corners. They remembered other royal deaths, some natural, some not. They traded stories in whispers only the brave dared hear. Was the king's end truly fate, or another page in a bloody ledger of betrayal? Each seasoned face wore lines carved by old fear. To them, the tension was all too familiar, a silent warning carried down through generations of uneasy succession. Down stone stairwells, servants spoke in coded fragments, exchanging news from the kitchens and below stairs. They described odd visitors and strange prescriptions sent to the royal chambers before Harthacnut's collapse. An unfamiliar healer, a goblet no one could trace. Rumours twisted through the corridors, growing stranger and more elaborate with each telling. In a world ruled by suspicion, even the smallest mystery loomed large, stoking the embers of collective dread. As the sun rose, the city outside the palace walls grew restless with curiosity and fear. The common folk whispered in markets and taverns, trading news of the king's death and the strange events that followed. Some mourned sincerely, others saw opportunity in instability. Merchants speculated on the future, soldiers sharpened their swords, priests and beggars alike felt an approaching storm. The fate of an entire kingdom now hinged on secrets kept and secrets kept and secrets revealed. The royal chapel, cloaked in incense and twilight, filled with soft chants for the king's soul. Noble heads bowed, but few eyes closed in true prayer. Each person's thoughts wandered to their own safety, fortunes and futures. The prayers for mercy may have been genuine, but so was the underlying calculation. Alliances forged in moments of grief could just as easily dissolve when the next opportunity arose. Faith offered comfort, but not certainty arose. Faith offered comfort, but not certainty. Edward's movements became the centre of quiet attention. Observers noted every meeting, every gesture, every emotion withheld. Even his silence spoke volumes. He neither claimed nor rejected power, but let the throne's gravity draw others in. In this landscape of mourning, his presence offered stability, or perhaps only another layer of mystery. Only time would tell if Edward was a saviour, a rival, or a shadow cast by the dead king's crown. At dusk, a hooded figure ventured into gardens overgrown and wild. She paused to offer a prayer to the restless spirits, laying lilies at the well-tended grave. Such small acts of devotion were common, but now each gesture took on sharp new meaning. In a time of fear, remembrance became political. The greatest danger lay not in open accusation, but in the quiet weighing of faces in the twilight, where every mourner feared what hid behind the veil. Beneath the gilded arches of the great hall, confidants and would-be kings met in tense parley. Promises were made, bargains struck behind veiled sleeves. Suddenly, names never uttered in public again echoed through the candle, fogold claims to the English throne rising like ghosts. Here, ambition seethed just beneath the dressings of grief. For days, neither tears nor laughter outlasted the calculating stares of the hungry and the haunted alike. Evenings descended in slow, dreamlike procession. The court attended lavish meals by candlelight, but cheer was as thin as gruel. Every toast recalled the cursed feast that felled their king, and many set aside their cups untouched. Waits for speeches stretched longer than usual, as guests studied faces and sidelong glances. Paranoia drifted among them like invisible smoke, lacing every word and gesture with quiet warning. It was a time for patience and for vigilance. Outside the palace, the city watched for signs of change through mist and gathering dusk. Church bells tolled for the king, but each ring also seemed to warn against unrest. In alleyways and marketplaces, the latest gossip sparked fueled tension. Even the poorest felt the shadow of royal uncertainty. All understood that power, once disturbed, rarely settled quietly. Every alley had a watcher, and every night the winds carried questions no one dared answer aloud. As days passed, the initial shock gave way to a tense, uneasy waiting. Parliament and council chambers filled with anxious voices, arguing inheritance and precedence under the thin veil of decorum. There was no easy path forward. Each choice risked division, each delay stoked fear. The kingdom's fate teetered on divided loyalties, consensus just out of reach. In this climate, silence became a shield and every uttered word a weapon. Candles flickered lower each night, but no one slept soundly. Nobles turned to old books of prophecy, searching for omens that might grant reassurance or warning. Some dreamed of the king's ghost pacing between the pews, others awoke certain they'd heard his voice. Grief and exhaustion wrapped the court in a kind of waking nightmare, where every shadow loomed larger and every secret spun a little tighter around those holding the keys to power. On the final day of mourning rituals, the court assembled for Harthacnut's funeral feast. Chairs stood empty, and no music was played. The sombre meal served not only to honour the dead, but to signal a turning point. Loyalties were revealed in who arrived, who abstained, and who dared to speak hope aloud. The road to the future was fogged in uncertainty, but none could ignore that the struggle to fill the throne had truly begun. As dusk settled after the funeral, widows' veils fluttered in the wind outside the palace. Some whispered prayers, others muttered curses of their own. The realm's future clung to every sigh and oath spoken beneath the setting sun. In the wake of Harthacnut's passing, England entered a new, restless, wary and watchful. The next chapter of its saga would be written by those bold enough to step from the shadows and those clever enough to survive. In this charged silence, Edward the Confessor's silhouette lingered longest in the memory. The veils of mourning fell, but suspicion and ambition remained. No one could know for certain what plots had been set in motion or what secrets had been carried to the grave. Yet the seeds of change had been sown in the whispers and in the widow's veils, and as the story moved forward, England would never be quite the same again. Chapter 9. Winds of Change. The kingdom stands silent in the aftermath of Harthacnut's sudden death. Whispers fill the candlelit halls, from grand feasts to the cold stone corridors. Nobles gather with uncertain eyes, unsure of what tomorrow will bring. There is a sense of both fear and hope rising, as England's future hangs suspended between echoing footsteps and the hush of ancient traditions grappling with the unknown. Edward the Confessor emerges from the periphery, moving with a calm that unsettles as much as soothes. His presence is quiet, enigmatic, and yet heavy with the possibility of destiny. Among the flickering torches and stormy skies, rival factions eye him warily. Old alliances tremble and new ones form in secret, and the realm feels the tremor of change in every breath and every glance exchanged in the shadows. Every great turning point in history is marked by a chill in the air. So it is now, with England shivering on the brink of a new order. Ancient laws are recited in hurried council meetings, their authority stretched thin by the winds of hope and uncertainty. The people sense the crossroads, where the stories of old kings give way to the promise of something strange and untested on the horizon. In the wooden halls of the nobles, banners ripple softly, bearing familiar crests that suddenly seem less certain in their claim. Old warriors speak of honour and duty, yet cast secret looks toward the rising figure of Edward. With Harthacnut's absence, each man must choose sides anew, and every family's future seems perched atop the shifting moods of court, waiting for the moment when fate decides its course. Edward's stillness stands in stark contrast to the fervent plotting all around him. Some see an anchor in the storm, others a cipher concealing motives yet to be revealed. Messengers dash across muddy roads, carrying tidings that could tilt the balance of power. On each distant horizon, thunder echoes nature herself, mirroring the turbulence of men's hearts and the restless spirit of a kingdom on the edge. The old guard, sworn to the memory of Harthacnut, clutch to customs that have ruled for generations. But younger voices press forward, asking if the throne still means what it once did. In the dusk-lit council rooms, arguments drift like smoke, each word fueling a fire that might yet consume all certainty. Tradition and ambition swirl together, blurring into a drama that will shape England's path anew. At the heart of it all, the land itself seems to hold its breath. Ancient forests watch in silence, rivers flow heavy beneath grey skies, and the distant clang of forge and bell signals change. Villagers murmur of omens, reading meaning into every restless wind. Legends of past kings mingle with dreams of greatness yet to come, as England waits for a sign from Edward or from fate itself. In secret, rival factions steel themselves. Some rally behind Edward, hoping his foreign years will bring fresh wisdom and peace. Others come together under old banners, fearing the loss of familiar power. Every oath and whispered pledge in those stone-walled chambers sharpens the tension, binding destinies together in a web of intrigue and hope. The looming struggle is as much for hearts as for the crown itself. Night cloaks the castles, but sleep is elusive. By flickering tallow light, scribes pen urgent letters, and nobles sharpen their plans as much as swords. Each movement is watched, every word weighed. All eyes turn toward Edward, who holds back from open claims, content for now to watch and judge. Shadows lengthen as the kingdom teeters, knowing that dawn will bring new allegiances and harder choices. In villages and fields beyond royal halls, common folk talk of the shifting winds. They remember stories of chaos after kings fall, balancing worry with a flickering hope that Edward might steady the land. Children hear tales of great crowns and broken swords as elders hush them with warnings. Even far from the centres of power, the pulse of change can be felt in every hearth, every cautious greeting at the market. Edward appears at public gatherings wrapped in simplicity, his gaze steady and voice quiet. To some, his restraint feels regal, a leader who listens to the shadows before he commands. To others, it is infuriating, a stillness bordering on weakness. This duality haunts every chamber and alley, fueling arguments and uncertain loyalties. England's destiny, it seems, rests on a figure as enigmatic as the mists that coil the land. Behind the scenes, powerful families weigh their options in tense meetings. Allies are courted over bread and mead, while old rivalries flicker to life. The lines between friend and foe are surprisingly thin. A word or look can redefine decades of trust or suspicion. These choices ripple outward, mixing ambition with anxiety, as each lord and lady feels the chill of history watching from just behind the curtain. As rumours swirl, Edward's half-brother Magnus, across the sea, watches closely, his own ambitions kindled by absence and opportunity. Norway's distant threat casts a subtle shadow, reminding every English noble that foreign powers still covet the island. Harthacnut's sudden end did not just unlock the gates of English ambition, but invited the world to speculate, interfere, and dream of conquest over divided soil. Councils convene with an urgency that betrays deep uncertainty. Arguments echo beneath timbered beams, as some plead for swift action and others counsel patience. The ancestral laws are read aloud as talisman against chaos, but each syllable now feels brittle and worn. It is a scene as old as England itself, the struggle to balance memory with the need to reinvent, to evolve, to survive against the storm. For Edward, the burdens of inheritance weigh silently. He carries scars from exile and memories of courtly suspicion, but also a vision of peace untouched by the blood feuds that shaped his youth. Shadows gather around him, allies and enemies alike trying to discern his intentions. All the while, Edward moves forward with measured steps, aware that a single moment may shatter the fragile calm he now embodies. Ancient rituals are performed in darkened churches, incense swirling as prayers rise for guidance and strength. Some whisper that destiny favours Edward, their hopes mingling with old fears of civil war. Royal seals are pressed onto waxen scrolls that travel to every corner of the realm, their contents holding promises or threats. The future feels at once close enough to touch, and as elusive as a dream slipping through tired fingers. Among the nobility, the pace of plotting quickens. Conversations take on a sharper edge, and each alliance is sealed with both handshake and lingering suspicion. The spectre of foreign invasion keeps the realm on edge, for even as they bicker, all fear outsiders who might claim what Harthacnut left behind. Beneath all the calculation runs a vein of hope that Edward might finally bring unity from the tumults of so many kings. Edward's path to kingship is not a triumphant march, but a cautious, careful negotiation. He listens to stories and grievances, addresses the council with dignity, and remains mysterious about his most private hopes. His calm unnerves those drunk on ambition. His silences weigh as much as any command. Through him, England's destiny seems both anchored and adrift, waiting for some sign that the winds will favour peace at last. As the struggles intensify, ancient grievances resurface. Stories are told in the great hearthlit halls, stories of kin betrayed, of loyalty stretching across generations. The memory of old kings and their bloody ends casts long shadows. Now, with Harthacnut gone, the question that haunts every corner of the land is simple but perilous. Who deserves the trust of England as these winds of change blow stronger and stronger? In the end, it is not swords that decide every fate, but words, those spoken in haste or in careful counsel. Edward waits, patient and inscrutable, while his supporters urge swift decisions. Every promise is tested against the ever-shifting alliances. The landscape of power, built on centuries of tradition, shivers in the storm. The outcome is uncertain, but every soul feels the gravity of this moment, this crossroads of England's story. Within the abbeys and monasteries, monks record these troubled days in neat script, sensing their chronicling will echo for centuries. Prayers are whispered for guidance, not just for the king, but for a people longing for direction. Hope and apprehension mingle in holy halls, as faith seeks to bridge the chasms growing between tradition and change. With every candle lit, the future flickers, promising both peril and renewal for the kingdom. As sunlight returns after storm and doubt, the land mourns the passing of one king while holding its breath for the rise of another. Edward's fate entwines with the hopes of a nation ready or unready for transformation. The old order wavers but does not quite collapse. Instead, it bends, battered by the winds of change, and all across England, even the quietest souls sense these are days that will echo forever. So England stands at the crossroads, the whisper of fate winding through castle stairwells and open fields alike. All await Edward's first decisive act, that moment which will reveal whether he is but a calm at the centre of the storm or a herald for something greater. Ancient traditions linger, heavy and expectant, as if listening for the next chapter of a story still being written beneath the shifting skies of this long-troubled land. As the chapter closes, the kingdom remains restless, caught between memory and destiny. The tension is a living thing, felt in markets, in halls, and even in the silent eyes of children born in uncertain times. Edward's rise is far from assured, but the events set in motion promise transformation. With every breath, England leans into the wind, bracing for the stories yet to come, stories shaped by hope, by history, and by the ever-changing tide. Chapter 10. Echoes in the gilt darkness. In the flickering half-light of a kingdom between ages, the death of Harthacnut lingers. His rule, marked by opulence and tension, dissolves into silence, the candlelight catching only fractured echoes of laughter and grief. As the halls grow cold, memories of lost feasts and shattered alliances begin to fade, leaving behind questions, regrets, and the quiet shadow of a reign abruptly ended. The clangor of cups has stilled, yet the stories persist. In shadowed corners and ancient corridors, whispers of Harthacnut drifter king who burned too brightly, whose choices wove uncertainty into royal succession. Now, England stands watchful, haunted by what was lost. Few truly weep for the fallen king, but his absence rearranges destinies, shifting ambitions and allegiances under the gilded darkness cast from his vanished court. Once, England's heart beat to the measured rhythm of celebration and intrigue. Now, the empty throne reflects a kingdom's uncertainty. The relics of Harthacnut's rule-twisted gold, goblets still stained by mead rest beneath layers of dust and memory. Every object holds a fragment of his legacy, but none reveal the true cost of that evening, broken trust, uncertain futures, and the heavy price of a crown taken for granted. Fires gutter along the palace walls. From the ruined banquet, figures fade into legend. Each silence, each unfinished toast, marks the moment when fate swerved. Harthacnut's passing birthed silent rivals, hopeful heirs, and kingdoms trembling on borders unseen. The flicker of candlelight plays over long tables still set for vanished guests, illuminating secrets only the walls remember. These moments fuse past to present, lingering like echoes in the chill of dawn. Harthacnut inspired neither devotion nor rebellion, merely a gnawing apprehension in the hearts of lords and kin. The feast where he fell now seems like a vision, gilded and cursed, with every spilled drop of mead sealing a new betrayal. Those who witnessed his end felt history tilt, unsure if they beheld the end of a noble house or the start of something darker. The hour was late, the reckoning only beginning. Some say a kingdom dies bit by bite at tables, in whispers, beneath the weight of unsaid things. The royal relics quietly gleam where once Harthacnut took pride of place, their surfaces reflecting ghosts of promises never kept. Broken alliances linger in the air, like frost refusing to thaw. The realm waits, restless, for a sign or salvation, but the king's passage has left only uneasy silence, and the suspicion that power's price remains unpaid. Old advisers pace deserted corridors, haunted by prophetic dreams and memories of counsel. Harthacnut's legacy, tangled with violence and feasting, lingers in dimly lit chambers. The echoes of his laughter, brash and fleeting, tell only part of the story. In the soft light of dying candles, a question persists: who truly profited from the king's sudden fall? Power, like candle wax, melts away, leaving only shadows to inherit the halls. There are those who remember Harthacnut as a prince of contradiction, slavish and severe, burdened and careless. Beneath the weight of the crown he bore scars invisible to his revellers, each toast masking a world of doubt. In the aftermath, England's fate hangs on threads spun by absence, rumour and ambition. As the realm mourns, the quiet tick of the hours feels heavy with what could never be mended. Candle-lit relics of Harthacnut's rain-tarnished crowns, forgotten oaths occupy their places in silence. Each artifact seems imbued with a mystery no chronicler can explain. Nobles gather in cautious circles, voices lowered, each plotting a future that might heal or worsen the shattered peace. The king's visage fades, but his choices linger in every uncertain glance, reminding all who remain of the fragile bargain between power and fate. In the echoing ballads sung by wandering minstrels, Harthacnut's story is a Korshana lesson sewn into melody. Thrones may glitter and feasts may dazzle, but beneath it all lies a dread as old as the land itself. His death at the feast is retold with awed disbelief, a king felled not by sword but by excess. Every retelling deepens the mystery as the truth slips further into the guilt-wrapped dusk of memory. Outside palace walls, England's fields lay dormant beneath cloudy skies, as if mirroring the hush that followed Harthacnut's passing. The peasants and townsfolk sense a change, though the details elude them only, the uneasy knowledge that rulers rise and fall, but consequence lingers. By firelight, elders recite tales of vanished kings and wasted splendour, shaping the legend of a reign lost before it truly took root. A single candle gutters out on the high table, its smoke curling upward like the last breath of an age. The guests who witnessed Harthacnut's collapse now swear quiet oaths, each mindful of secrets exchanged amid spilled wine and hurried farewells. The bonds forged and broken that night ripple outward, changing fates far beyond the banquet hall. The world waits, as if holding its breath, to see which new shadow will next claim the throne. Harthacnut's life ended suddenly, leaving behind not just an empty throne but a riddle. Was he doomed by treachery, by old wounds, or merely by the weight of expectation? Each chronicler fashions their own answer, but the truth lies buried with the king hidden among crumbling stone, within fragile alliances, beneath layers of long-forgotten shame. In the darkness history's wheel turns, indifferent to longing or regret. The final feast lingers in memory, adorned with shadows instead of laughter. Between every gleam of gold and echoing footstep, the sense of an ending abides. As new claimants gather and rivals sharpen their ambitions, the relics of the past lie watching mute witnesses to power's unpredictable cost. The realm brims with rumours, but the true legacy of Harthacnut may be the silence after revelry, more lasting than any toast. The cost of power is counted not in jewels, but in sleepless nights and vanished friends. Harthacnut once thought himself secure among loyalists, yet every flicker of candlelight in his empty halls betrays the truth. Kingdoms endure, but memories shift and blur. Some weep for the king, while others dream of opportunity, their ambitions stoked by a single night's chaos. England prepares for the trials ahead, knowing history watches with patient eyes. Those who served Harthacnut now serve themselves. They move softly, wary of new bargains, each suspecting the next twist of fortune. The king's life flickers in their memories, a warning half-heeded, half-dismissed. From the dusk beyond stained glass, the future seems uncertain, shaped by forces unleashed in a single fatal evening. Every shadow in the great hall hints at a secret, every silence feels poised on the edge of another storm. Some say the feasts have lost their joy, as though the spirit of celebration departed with the king. In the solitude of the palace, silver platters gather dust and goblets remain untouched. A cold wind stirs among the relics, whispering of triumphs wasted and friendships squandered. Across England, the people sense a shift-on reigns. End is never truly the beginning of another, but rather a passage through uncertainty's long night. In the candlelit corners where Harthacnut's circle once plotted, only echoes remain. These echoes are restless, filled with regrets and questions no living voice can settle. Was the king merely unlucky, or betrayed by those closest to him? The answer dissolves in the smoke curling for the rafters, leaving those left behind to measure the cost of lost faith, and wonder what new darkness might yet unfold for England. Above the chessboard of power, time advances unheeding. Even now, as old banners lose their colour and wax dwindles on stone, courtiers whisper and hope for favour. The memory of Harthacnut sharpens ambitions and stirs fresh dread. Between fleeting glory and enduring shadows, rulers come and go, but the echoes of this night's events will shape England for generations, their impact resonating quietly in every corner of the realm. The mysteries of Harthacnut's death persist despite the passage of years. Chroniclers argue over details, while survivors guard their secrets behind careful smiles. The king's reign, though brief, cast a disproportionate shadow that coloured every choice to follow. The darkness of that candlelit night lingers, threading through England's chronicles, reminding all who rule that the cost of even a single misstep may outlast any triumph. In these final reflections, the story closes with a question. What remains when glory fades? The faded splendour of Harthacnut's court, the hush after revels cease, and the ache of what might have been. His ghost haunts more than Halset stirs in every uncertain oath, and every alliance brokered in haste. Such is the fate of kings whose legacy is written in both gold and shadow, echoing forever in the silence of England's night. Now, as morning breaks beyond tangled battlements, those who remain look toward the uncertain future. The feast is ended, the revellers gone home, and Harthacnut's story becomes one of many warning tales whispered across the land. Through the mists of time, his reign's lessons endure a caution imbued in ancient gold, solemn oaths, and the hush of a nation holding its breath for what dawn might bring. Power, like the candle's flame, is beautiful and brief. Harthacnut chased ambition but met only shadows in the end. As the golden light of memory dims, England's history is richer for the mystery, sorrow and awe of what transpired. The true legacy lies in questions left unanswered, ghosts that linger, and a kingdom forever changed. In the silent corridors of the past, the king's story glimmers on, inviting reflection with every fleeting step. The candlelight fades, and so does the legend of Harthacnut, a king whose passing haunts the twilight of his age. In this calm, final hush, England stands on the cusp of new rulers, new hopes, and new storms. The questions his reign left behind still shape the course of history, and the silence in the hall serves as a reminder that glory, like candlelight, is precious because it never truly endures.